Hi, friends. We are super blessed today to have a fabulous guest in Merv Jenkins. Merv, you and I go back a long way, about
Hey,
15 years or more. And I'm just so excited to get to introduce you to my audience. Currently, Merv Jenkins is the National Academic Advisor for Nearpod. But that was more a calling than a job. And he has done such a fabulous job of doing just that, following his calling and figuring out how to turn what he loves into a career and a paycheck, which is not a bad thing. So, Merv,
and
welcome to
thank
Productive
you.
Joy.
Thank you for having me, Doc. Yeah.
Yeah, and I right back at you, Doc. So super proud of you for that. I don't think officially congratulated you on getting your doctorate. I
Well,
bet we'll get
well,
into that.
thank you. It seems like it's been forever now, but it hasn't been too long ago. So thank you.
No, and I know that was I know from experience that's a lesson in tenacity
Yeah.
and all the things. It's all the things. So here's what I'd love to start with.
Yeah.
I'd love for people to want to keep listening because we don't have long to convince them that you are somebody that they can learn something from. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your story in a way that'll get people to stick around?
But first of all, what you got to know is I always carry my speaker with me. All right, my Bluetooth. All right. Hey, yo, let's get productive, boy. Talking about a show called Productive Joy. I came here today for everybody that's selling. Can't get it down with Dr. Christy McMullen. Yes, we got it going on. It's about to happen. If you don't know me, man, I love rapping. It's spectacular, y'all. There you have it. Started as a teacher, eventually ended up that habit. Doing something a little different. Young, black, and gifted. I know that they with it. Now I do the thing for near God, near God. I got people saying, dear God, he's so hard when he's on the mic because I give the little students something that they like. I bring joy to the classroom, joy to the music, nice with the freestyle. They love how I do it. So y'all just stop here to run. Please take your time. Happy Valentine. Got it going on the 14th of February. Spectacular. My styles, they sort of vary. So I'm going to end it right there on that note. In case you don't know, your boy don't blow smoke. I'm crazy dope from grabbing the mic. I'm going to stop right now because you're already hyped like this, y'all. Like that, y'all. All right. I had to stop there, Chris.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy.
So for those that don't know, my background is definitely hip hop music. I like to tell people I was a hip hop artist before an educator, but eventually, thanks to a mom who was very consistent, I found my way and fell in love with education. And the crazy thing is, I didn't love it when I was a student, but I also wanted to make sure that experience was the exact opposite for anybody that I would come into contact with. And that's kind of been my driving force all throughout my career. So that's the wrap up. Former hip hop artist, actually still hip hop artist, but working full time in the ed tech arena. And it's been quite the journey, man. It's been a long time, and I'm just happy to still be doing the work, Chris.
Well, and you're doing the work so beautifully, Merv. So our paths crossed before you worked for Nearpod at Avid Center, and I watched you grow in the last few years into exactly who you are meant to be. And I really believe that all of us have a calling. And
Yep.
when we fall into the space where our calling is actually executed, then we're able to come into our own. And I would
Yeah.
love for you to kind of talk to the audience a little bit about how that happened. Because when I first met you, you weren't quite there yet. And yet
Yep.
you are blooming in that space now.
Well, it's interesting because I like to tell young people that there's a difference between a slight difference, but a difference between what you're passionate about and what your purpose is. And a lot of times people like use the words interchangeably. And I do believe there's a difference. The two can go hand in hand, but with a passion, it usually speaks to something that's probably more focused on self. It's self gratitude. When you add a purpose to it, that's when you're helping uplift others. And that's where the magic truly happens, man. There's no better feeling than seeing others find themselves, find that path, and just be excited about day to day living, learning, loving, etc. So for me, I would say don't burn bridges because I found myself where I'm at right now in the day. It started back in 2003, 4. I was a high school assistant principal at Chapel Hill High School in North Carolina, and I had just been invited to do a nationally syndicated NPR show at the time called The Story with Dave Gordon. And he asked me to come in because he had seen some articles in the Raleigh newspaper, Chapel Hill paper, about this rapping principal at Chapel Hill High School. So he had me come in. He called the show The Rapping Principal. And after our interview, not long after, I was contacted by a good friend of mine who went on to become a legendary hip hop producer, and two white guys out of New York City that literally contacted me and said, "Hey, we heard the interview, and we're starting a company using hip hop music in the classroom. Would you be willing to do some songs for us?" So I didn't think much of it. Ended up working with all three of those guys. We did the songs. They launched the platform, which happened to be Flocabulary. And over the years after, they would call me up and ask me to moonlight, contract out, and go to places like Chicago and do onboarding with teachers. And I did that, and then just sort of not really lost touch, but moved on. I became a principal. Life got a little busier than it was before. And eventually, after the principalship, which I thoroughly enjoyed, I went to work for Abbott. And it was during my time with Abbott, about a decade into Abbott, that I got a call out of the blue one day. I was actually doing one of the Abbott Summer Institutes in Anaheim. I'll never forget. And my phone rings, and I see the name of the CEO of Vocabulary. So I answer the phone, and my first response is, "When can I start working?" And he just burst out laughing. And he said, "Merv, your spotty senses never fail." Huge Spider-Man fan. He said,
Yes,
"Your
you are.
spotty senses never fail." And yes, that's why I'm calling. And that's when the work started, which was 2018, October 2018. So I went on to do that, and it just felt right from the beginning. Hip hop mixed with education. It's what I've done all my life, something I've prepared for all my life, not necessarily thinking there would be a job for it, but here we are.
Here we are. Well, you said something really powerful about the difference between passion and purpose. And when the two meet, that's when the magic happens, right? Well, this podcast is called Productive Joy. And the reason it's called Productive Joy is because I believe you can't have one without the other, right? You can't be productive until there's joy in what you're doing. And I think that goes along with your passion and purpose. So I'm
Love it.
curious, what would be your definition of productive joy? If you had to describe it, how would you describe it?
That one's easy, man. And it was Chris, good friend of mine, Chris Rock, the comedian. I call him Chrissy. But I remember we were having dinner some years ago in Atlanta, and we're sitting at the table, me, him, another one of the brothers, Brian, good friend of the family, Point. And he says to us, "Man, you know what, man? I'd love to go to this 12 o'clock midnight movie with you guys." It was some Marvel movie that came out, of course. And we were
Yes,
trying
you're a
to
Marvel
come
fan.
Yes, we were trying to get him to come to the 12 o'clock showing, and he said, "Nah, I got to get up early in the morning and I got to be on point. And quite frankly, I'm so excited about this project I'm working on. Like, I don't want to even go to sleep." Like, he was ready to just walk away from dinner and go straight to work. And he said to us, like, "Man, I sometimes my heart goes out to you guys because you're working, and I don't call what I do work. I get paid for it, but I just love what I do to the point, even when it's time to go to sleep, I'm upset because I want to stay up and keep doing it." And I was just like, whoa, like I don't think I, up until that point, never heard anybody that fired up about what they did for a living. And it was one of those things that just always stuck with me. And I was like, man, how cool would it be to make that like the landing spot? And that's kind of been the focus at this point in my life for sure.
So that's productive joy right there, where you don't feel like you ever have to go to work because everything you do is that fulfilling.
There it
So I'm
is.
curious too, what advice would you have for someone who is not living in that space today, this day? How do you get there? Because you've leveraged your talents. You have done a
Yep.
beautiful job of knowing what you're good at and staying in your lane and saying, all right, these are my God-given talents. I'm going
Yep.
this way. How do you help people get there? What advice would you give to somebody who isn't living the dream at the moment?
It's so many layers to that, Chris. And I think the first thing always is to acknowledge that you're probably not in the right seat on the bus. That's just the best way to put it. A lot of times people are in a position and they just don't see it. Sometimes it's no fault of their own. Other times it's just, hey man, I'm pushing through this. And you gotta come to grips or make peace with that. And that's truly when you open yourself up, in my opinion, to other opportunities. Sometimes they fall in your lap. Other times you got to be a little aggressive and get out there and make it happen. Quite frankly, the ultimate entrepreneurship, if there's something that doesn't exist, create it. And I get it. It's easier said than done because let's be honest, at a certain age, life kicks in. You're paying bills, mortgages, rent, car payments, groceries, medical expenses, the list goes on. And it does create a spider web effect. But if you're intentional about the moves you're making, you can slowly work your way into that position that you see yourself in. So it's very important, one, to identify that this isn't it. And then two, to start planting the seeds and making the small baby steps to get you to that place you want to be. And again, you could luck up and it happen overnight. It could take you years to make it happen. But either way, I feel like if you're working towards it, there's always some kind of gratification just in the journey that keeps you going. So there it is.
I appreciate that. And you said making peace with being in the wrong seat on the bus. And I think that's probably the biggest aha from what you just said for me, is recognizing that it might have been the right seat at one point, but you also have to be okay with being vulnerable that you're no longer the right person for that thing, whatever it is. So for our listeners, if you're listening right now and you feel like you're sitting in the wrong seat, it's uncomfortable, it's just yucky, recognize that step one is to say, yeah, this isn't my seat. Step two is to get up and move to the right seat, whatever that might be. And that's what you've done a beautiful job of, Merv. And so let's talk too. You got your doctorate recently. It's been, a year or more since you finished?
It's 2 years now.
2 years. Gosh, that went fast. Okay. So you decided to do that later, kind of like I did. So what was the impetus for you to say, you know what, I don't have everything I need right now to do what I want to do, even though you had your dream job at the time? So what was the push?
And just to be sure, has it been longer than 2? It was December 2021. So,
oh my gosh, look at you go.
Yes, so it's been time flies, Chris. But the biggest push for that, Chris, was it wasn't something, and my mom hates when I say this, but it wasn't something that was on my bucket list, to be quite honest with you. If it was, I probably would have done it a long time ago when I was in the school system, public school system. It just would have made more sense for me. This was really driven by the fact that my mom is a lifelong educator. She's a retired school teacher. She did do her master's, the same school that I got my master's and doctorate from, Charleston Southern University. Big shout out. And it was something she wanted to do, and time didn't allow for it. Like I said, life kicked in. She started having kids, and with work and everything else, working 2 jobs, etc., it just didn't happen. So she always would drop and plant these little seeds with me. Merv, it'll be great. You go back and get your doctorate. You're in education. It'll be good for you, da, da, da. And I eventually just kind of caved in, and I knew deep inside that it would bring the biggest joy, speaking of joy, to my mom. And I love my parents, both of them. So after a while, I just knew that it was time to do it. And I was in a place where I could do it. I was supported by the folks at Vocabulary. When I threw the idea out there, they were like, absolutely, go for it and let us know what you need. And I just went to work, man. And quite frankly, it made it a pretty seamless process. Of course, there were those classes you hated to see coming, like stats for me. I definitely did not look forward to going at.
But that wasn't joyful? That was not productive joy?
No, not at all. I fought tooth and nail through that class. But yeah, man. So not the answer the folks out there listening were probably expecting, but it was definitely something for moms. Did it for moms, yep.
Well, and you know what? There's power in that. I think sometimes we do things just for us, and then they end up being selfish things that are more passion than purpose,
Yep.
like you were saying. And
Yep.
I think that maybe we've got to recognize that sometimes the two have to meet in order for us to move forward, for sure.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
I love it. So I bet people are curious because you just kind of dropped the fact that you're sitting around smoking a cigar with Chris Rock. And that's, not exactly something that most people can say they've done. How did you and Chris meet and where did all of that come from? Just curious.
All right, and I'm gonna correct this. It was dinner.
Oh, not cigars. Usually it's
he,
cigars with
he,
humor. He
he,
doesn't smoke.
oh, it usually is with me, but not with him.
Okay,
Not with
that's
him.
good to know. Wait, sorry.
Yeah,
Didn't mean to, Chris.
yeah.
My bad.
That's all right. That's all right. So I went to college with Chrissy's one of the many brothers, younger brother Brian. Brian and I are best friends to this day. And that's really where the connection happened. Brian's mom took me in as her own. So she calls me her godson. And even the book that I just completed about a year or so ago, To the Beat of Leadership, A Story of High and Low Notes, the foreword was written by, I call her Mama Rock, but Rose Rock. And that's Chrissy's mom. So that's the whole connection. And it's been several decades now. It's just family at this point.
That's wonderful. Well, and you just very slickly brought up your book that I was getting ready to bring up. It's so perfect timing. Tell us a little bit more about your book. What was the impetus for it? And what would people learn if they were to pick it up?
Yeah. So To the Beat of Leadership, A Story of High and Low Notes. It's a play on, obviously, the beat and being hip hop. And it truly does tell the story of a young kid growing up in rural South Carolina and just the joys and the mysticism behind some of the folklore from back home, some of the things that really did occur even before my time that made the city what it is today. And then just that journey from there and being a young man who was the reluctant student that eventually found this thing that he was crazy passionate about. Wasn't a purpose at the beginning, but that was hip hop music. And then how those two worlds were able to coexist, something that I never saw coming. As I said earlier, that's the story that I tell. So it really picks up from before birth in the small town of Utahville, South Carolina. And it takes us on a journey through my college years at Benedict College in Columbia, South Carolina. Big shout out BC Tigers. and trips to New York and working with some of the famous artists from the late 80s, early 90s, some of the biggest hip hop stars that I had the opportunity to sort of cross path with and work with in some capacity. And then how it all turned into this young Black man who's now in a position of leadership, and the lessons from those younger years and how I was able to bring some of that as a sort of a blueprint or a guiding map of sorts into the position that I didn't ever see myself being in, which was the school principal and director and now academic advisor. Like, I just didn't see it for myself. But eventually, when I did, I realized how the things I never thought really applied really did make a difference in the journey.
I love that, Merv. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for being willing to be vulnerable enough to tell the whole story, right? Sometimes we see people where they are and we don't ever get to peek behind the curtain as to what got them to where they are. And I think there's so much power in taking the time to tell the whole story. So pretty exciting. And we'll make sure we put in the show notes exactly how to get your book. Yes, that's very important for sure. So I have a couple rapid fire questions for you. Are you ready? Are you feeling stoked about it? I know you are.
Let's go.
All right. Before we do that, one last thing I want to make sure. So you are notorious for giving people nicknames. People are hearing you call me Chris. I literally have only ever been called Chris by one other person in my life, and it was my brother's girlfriend. When I was like, so truly the only other person that calls me Chris, but I love it when you do because I know where it comes from. And I know nobody else calls Chris Rock Chrissy because that's just not a thing. What is first of all, do you only do that with people you like? I hope the answer is yes, because you've given me one. Is that true?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's good. And what is the reason for it?
It's a little bit of hip hop. That's really where it comes from. I can't be any more direct than that. There were times in my life when I was with people every day, like more hours than I was with family members. And literally, we didn't know each other's real names, like
Oh,
government
wow.
names. Everybody was a nickname, and that was just it. Like I remember one time, and I actually talk about this in the book. It was a very defining moment in my life at a young age, but I was in college and I had just gotten in some serious trouble. Thought I wasn't going to be able to get my teacher's license, and I was so fed up. I went to the group of guys I was hanging with at the time, and we were all in the dorm room doing what the guys would do, drinking beer, smoking weed, you name it. And that night, I just kind of sat there looking around the room. There's about 15, 20 guys, and it's loud. We're playing some video game, Tecmo Bowl or whatever. And I just got everyone's attention. I said, look, man, I said, how many of us in this room even know our real name? And one guy looked at me and he said, you're Spec, right? And I'm like, yeah, but what's my real name? He's like, Spec. He's like, nah. And I said, we got to change things up, man. Like, we really got to, like, if we're really friends, let's travel to each other's house during the break. I'm in South Carolina. You're in New York. You're in Florida. Let's take turns, go see parents, meet parents, learn where you grew up, the people that you know and love. And obviously that went over like a lead balloon. One guy looked at me and said, whatever you've been smoking, kid, that's what I want to be smoking. And I got up and walked out. And it was hard because they were laughing. I could hear them laughing as I walked down the hall. And a part of me even said, hey, man, turn around, go back in the room and tell them you were just playing and just pick up where you left off. And then something said, nah, keep walking. It's time for change. And I kept walking, and
Wow.
change came. And long story short, too late, but it came pretty fast with a whole lot of hard lessons, but it's brought me to the place I'm at today. And it's a great story to share with young people because peer pressure is real. We deal
Yeah.
with it all throughout our lives, even as older adults. That's something that we deal with, and you just got to become good at it. And the earlier, the better.
Oh, thank you, Merv. I'm so glad I asked that question because you are Merv to me, but you are Spec to an awful lot of people, and a little bit of in between is probably where the real Merv lies. All right. Now here's your rapid fire. Sorry, I derailed us for a second, but not for long.
Sorry.
So I'm curious about I have three questions for you. First question, how do you know you're showing up as your authentic self?
Once again, that's easy. It feels good. It's a very natural, feel good moment. And when I say that, people sometimes confuse it with, you're not nervous? Yeah, I'm on stage a lot. I was just in Vegas a couple of weeks ago in front of a crowd of about 700 people. And twice, actually, 3 times, opening, closing, and doing a big panel discussion. And you're always nervous, but you feel good. It's not that bad nervous feeling. I remember Michael Jackson saying one time, he gets nervous every time he steps on stage. Really? Like, so if he was saying that, then yes, every time the nerves are racked up, but you feel good. It's just an adrenaline rush that the hairs on your arm stand up and you just know, you feel it. That's it, Chris.
I love it. I love it. All right. How do you channel your best self on your worst days?
Whoo, man. You are for me. And everybody has to find what works for them. And I really think that question has a lot to do with your life story. So for me, one of the things I like to do is I play instrumental music all the time. So that can often lead to me writing music. I'm in the zone about something. I usually play music that matches my feelings. So if I'm feeling down, I'm playing music that has a little damper to it. If I'm feeling excited, of course, that's the kind of music I'm playing. So I write. That's one way. Also, I like the quietness, and people still don't really know that about me. Who don't know me know they see me in action, and it's like, man, that guy is like fired up all the time. No, absolutely not. I love the quiet, so I don't mind stepping out and sitting next to a pond, like literally in the grass, and just sun beaming on me, an hour of just silence, and mind just feeling like it's reaching out throughout the universe. that's good for me. That works for me. I'm definitely that person. And I like it. I come back feeling energized. The last thing I'll say is trips to my parents. Both my mom and dad are still alive. And right now, I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, a little place called Johns Island. They're about an hour and 20-minute drive from me. But to go home and to just be in the presence of them and just home itself and the memories. And that's also quiet time for me. I don't spend a lot of time in their face talking. I can just sit on the porch and I'm perfectly fine. And I get to think, just really let my mind go and think. That's what does it for me.
You're safe. You're safe in that space, right? All right, last question. If people don't remember anything else about what you just said in the last 30 minutes, what do you really want people to know because they took the time to listen to this podcast?
It's not even something I said directly, but I alluded to it. I think throughout the conversation is we got to take care of our young people, man.
Mm.
There's a story that we told and I picked up during my time at Abbott about a specific African tribe from way back when, and they were a warring tribe that the anthropologists in their studies and interviews asked, what is the most important resource? And they were looking for an answer like gold or diamonds or something along that lines. And they said the children.
Mm.
That is the most important thing. And without it, we're nothing, Chris. So I really want folks to realize that if you're in a position where you're working with young people, don't take it for granted. If you are not, and you got kids, if you got siblings, whatever the case might be, appreciative and thankful that you're blessed with that opportunity to touch a young life, because that's truly what changes the world. And it's what wakes me up every day and keeps me going in the work that I do. So that's the big takeaway.
I love it. And that's our moral imperative, right? We've got to take care of each other. So Dr. Jenkins, thank you. Thank you for choosing to spend this time with us. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for being a light in this world and for using your talents for good. You really are doing a great job. So friends, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Productive Joy. And I am just so excited that you chose to stick around. And I hope that you'll choose to come back, because the whole purpose of our time together is to turn fun into action.